Welcome to our 18th annual Veterans Day ceremony. Today we take the opportunity at Crofton Middle School to celebrate the men and women who have served and currently serve in the United States Armed Services. We are pleased to have many special guests join us today, and I would like to take this time to recognize them. Mr. Lou Perrone, World War II veteran and guest speaker. Mr. Jack Goldstein, World War II veteran and guest speaker. Mr. Joseph Sanders, retired Chief Warrant Officer for the United States Marine Corps. Mrs. Monique Jackson, our Deputy Superintendent. Dr. Maureen McMahon, our Deputy Superintendent. Mrs. Carolyn Burton Page, Director of School Performance. Mrs. Carol Ann McCarty, Director of Partnerships, Development, and Marketing. Ms. Eve Chase, Coordinator of Social Studies. Mrs. Barbara Milhausen and Mrs. Betsy Crooks, Social Studies Teacher Specialist. Josie Urea, Student Member of the Board of Education, and Mr. John Walker, World War II veteran, age 97. As most of you know, the words of our national anthem come from a poem written by Francis Scott Key. In preparing for this event, I found myself wondering about those words, the words I've sung and heard so many times. We sing the first verse of his poem. In plain language, they say this: "Did you see this morning the flag with its broad stripes and bright stars, the one we observed last night before it got dark? The burst of light from rockets and bombs let us know through the night that the flag gallantly continued to fly above the battle. Now that it's morning, have we survived this battle? Have we prevailed? Does our star-spangled banner still fly over our land?" When this was written, it was a question. Does our flag still wave? Have we prevailed? Have we triumphed? But now when we sing our national anthem, we don't ask, we emphatically say, our flag does still wave. We have prevailed over anything that may have threatened its existence. We can never become complacent about our nation's greatness or our nation's security. Many people have contributed to what makes our country noble, but the security of our nation, our values, and our land is owed almost entirely to the men and women who have served in our country's armed forces. These people, these great people, have endured tremendous losses for the security of our nation and its values, if not in the form of life or limb, in the form of experiencing the harshnesses or atrocities of war. Simply the loss of the time with their families is a great sacrifice. So it is fitting that our nation dedicates one day, Veterans Day, to honor their service to our country. And it is more than fitting that we never become complacent to what our country has, a flag that still waves over the land of the free and the home of the brave. At this time, I ask that all members from all branches of the military stand and be recognized. Thank you so much. We are honored and proud that each of you are joining us today. Each year, 8th grade students research and present a topic supporting the National History Day project theme. This year's theme is Triumph and Tragedy. Our guest speakers have agreed to join us today to honor veterans and to support National History Day. I hope you enjoy our ceremony. The Annapolis High School NJROTC will now present the colors.
Present colors. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Please help me in welcoming the Crofton Middle Women's Choir under the direction of Mr. Robert Abbott. The choir will be performing United We Stand, composed by Sally Albrecht and Jay Althouse.
United we stand. United we stand. United we stand, America. Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be free. Tis a gift to be free. Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be free. Oh, beautiful for heroes in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's bride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. United we stand. United we stand. United we stand. America.
Thank you, Women's Choir. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jack Goldstein. Dr. Goldstein was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and enlisted in 1942 to serve his country before he graduated from Atlantic City High School, New Jersey. Prior to reporting for active duty, Jack moved to Washington, D.C., and became a civilian apprentice pattern maker at the U.S. Naval Yard. Despite years of training to become a pilot, it did not work out, but he did not give up. Jack loves airplanes and decided to go to the armament school since it was the quickest way to get into the air. As staff surgeon during World War II, he flew in 25 combat missions over Germany in the Army Air Corps, 8th Air Force, 381st Bomb Group, 535th Bomb Squadron. He flew in a B-17 bomber, his squadron named Mrs. Dragon. For his meritorious service, Jack was awarded with the Air Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 3 battle stars in World War II Victory Medal, Good Conduct Medal, and the American Defense Service Medal. His brother, Robert Goldstein, also served in World War II, but in the Navy. On October 28, 1945, Jack Goldstein was honorably discharged. After the Army, Jack graduated from George Washington University School of Pharmacy. Later, at age 49, he entered Howard University School of Dentistry and graduated 4 years later. Dr. Goldstein attends reunions of the 381st and World War II events. In 2015, he took a ride in a B-17 at a Collins Foundation air show. He currently lives in Annapolis, Maryland, where he is adored by his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchild. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jack Goldstein.
I enlisted into the Army Air Corps in late 1942. I enlisted for pilot training, but washed out a little later on. The Air Corps was divided into air forces, such as the 8th Air Force, the 9th Air Force, 15th Air Force, and so on. And again, the Air Forces were divided into groups. So I was in the 8th Air Force with the 381st Bomb Group. We flew out of England, Ridgewell, England, and I flew as a waist gunner on a B-17 for 25 combat missions. I don't know if anybody here knows what a B-17 looks like. Anybody here know? Okay, I'll show you a model here. This was a B-17. And my position was here, waist gunner. Mr. Perrone and I were both in the same group, but different squadrons. The B-17 was not pressurized. And so when we took off, we climbed to 10,000 feet, we had to go into oxygen, wear oxygen masks and breathe through the oxygen supplied in the airplane. If you didn't have it, this oxygen, in about 30 seconds you were passed out, and about 15 minutes you were gone. It also was not, the B-17 was not heated, and we used to have to wear heated suits. Occasionally a glove or a boot would malfunction and wouldn't work to keep us warm, and so we had to circulate the blood by kicking our feet or moving our hands or something like that, so that it wouldn't get frostbitten. I understand that when you go up 1,000 feet, the temperature drops 2 degrees. And so where we flew on bomb missions, it was always 30 or 40 degrees below zero. And we usually took off at 6 or 7 o'clock in the mornings and climbed to altitude. Usually in England there was an overcast, and we circled around the airport until we came out to the blue skies and conformed into a formation. We then there was hundreds of airplanes flying up in there because we were all going over to Germany at the same time, or nearly the same time. And the lead airplane in our group used to shoot out different color flares, and like a red and green one, and we all would congregate into that area and form into a group to go over to Germany. Once we flew over the Channel or the North Sea, we increased our altitude to our bombing altitude. And once we got over into Germany, they started shooting anti-aircraft at us, and we had flak coming up. I don't know if you all know what flak is, but they would shoot up missiles at us that would burst at the same altitude that we were on and spread shrapnel all around, hoping to shoot us down. I have a picture of something. Yeah. I have a picture, I can pass this around, of flak. This is pretty intense here because it was when our group went over to Schweinfurt on April of '44. Pardon? Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
In April of '44, then we lost more than half of our airplanes. And if you were shot down, we had a little escape kit on our parachute harness. And it only contained some sort of a compass. Mine looked like a little button. And you put it on the tip of a piece of wood or a pencil, and it would point north. There was also something in this little kit that if you were injured and in pain, they gave you what they call a morphine syringe that you could shoot yourself with, get rid of the pain. And also a couple pieces of chocolate to hold you over for a while. Let me see here. We also carried what they called an escape map. And let me get that. No, it's silk. This is what was called an escape map. It was printed on both sides, and it was made out of silk. From what I understand, they made it out of silk because if you had to open it up, it didn't make any noise. It was printed on both sides so that you could orientate yourself where you were.
Can I walk that around?
Sure.
Thank you.
And occasionally we flew close to the Russian lines. And if you were shot down or had to land in a Russian line, they had a little, let me see, there's a, we used to have to wear this around our neck. It was a little American flag, and on this side here, it says, "Ja Americanus," which means I'm an American. And the instructions were that if it isn't out, to show them to don't reach for it or they would kill you, the Russians. And we flew to a point over Germany, which was about 50 miles from the target. And from there on in, the bombardier would take over with the Norden bomb sight and fly the airplane to the target. Well, in the meantime, we were hitting the flak, and when we got to the target, we dropped our bombs and then headed away. We usually had flak coming in 15 minutes before we hit the target, 15 minutes after we hit the target. Now, I was over there late during the war. My friend here, Lou, was there earlier. We only ran into fighters twice. Once was a Messerschmitt 109, and once was a Messerschmitt 262. Now, the 262 was the first German jet that we had seen. I had never seen one before, never heard of one before. The 109 came through our formation, and I took about 20 or 25 shots at it. But the 262, the jet came through so fast, I couldn't even get a shot at it. After we dropped our bombs, we went back to we headed back to our base in Ridgewell, England. And when we landed there, the first thing they gave us was some hot chocolate and a shot of whiskey to warm you up and to make you talk more, because from there we went to the interrogation desk, and where they interrogated us as to where we saw flak, where we saw fighters, and if the bombs dropped where they were supposed to drop, or in a factory or some marshalling yards or railroad yards, or some fuel dumps or something like that. Now, we flew during the day, and our bombing was to hit special things like the marshalling yards. And the British flew at nighttime. We were doing what they called precision bombing, because we had certain targets to hit. And the British flew at nighttime, and they had what they called pattern bombing, which they just bombed the city and let it burn out the whole town. When we got back, as I say, we went to the interrogation desk, and they asked us where we saw certain things, and then from there we went to eat, because we didn't have anything to eat for 8.5 and 9.5 hours. That's how long the missions were. We had to wear masks for most of the time, the oxygen mask for most of the time. But that's about all I can tell you about it. Is there any questions or anything I can answer? I don't see anybody, so I'll get my friend here. He was in the same group I was in, but at a different squadron. Lou?
The student's going to introduce you first.
Thank you, Dr. Goldstein. Our first guest, Mr. Perrone, was born and raised in Hartford, Connecticut. He joined the service at the age of 19 and fought in World War II. At the end of the war, Mr. Perrone worked in the garment industry and got married and raised 3 children with his wife. He spent many years in Florida and now resides in Annapolis to be near his daughter and grandchildren. Please help me welcome Mr. Perrone.
Thank you very much. I'll start off by saying it's a young man's game. If they'd asked me, well, they wouldn't ask me today because I'm 96 years old, but if they'd asked me in those days, I'd tell them, forget it, put me in the rig or whatever. But anyway, we'd start off early in the morning, go to briefings, then go to our airplanes, go to the shacks that came with all our bomber airplanes, and got our armament. And then we went off on a mission.
Lou, you need to show where your position?
Yeah.
Jack has a replica here. This was my spot. That little ball on the bottom of the airplane. Some guys smaller than, I'm a pretty small guy, smaller than I am, could wear a parachute in the ball turret. I wasn't that lucky. Some guys could open those doors, that door behind you, and just roll out. but you had your parachute on, and you had a good shot of being okay. I wasn't that fortunate, and I didn't need it. Fortunately, I was supposed to do 25 missions. I ended up doing 32 missions. But that was because I got hit by flak in the hand, and I had to stay down for a couple of weeks until that healed over. And during that time, I became what they called, from a ball turret gunner to a toggleier. Now, a toggleier sits in the waist, but drops his bombs off the lead ship, so that when I saw his first bomb drop, I would trigger my bombs. And that's the way I finished my missions as a toggleier. But I started out as a ball turret gunner. A tough job. I did a lot of missions that I thought I was never going to come back up from. Fortunately, I did every one except being hit in the hand with some flak, and I was only down a short time. You know, when you get to be old like me, you forget a lot of stuff. It's a young man's game. When you get on after 27, 28 years old, you know too much. You don't want to do what we had to do. I don't know. I'm sure there's a million questions you guys have, and there's a lot of them I could answer, but I don't want to take up all your day and all that stuff. I'm just happy to be here, able to talk to you, and war is a tough game. In any case, you try to avoid it. I was lucky, and I finished my missions, and I stayed. I was supposed to come home in September, and they said to me, "What do you want to go home for? We're going to give you a 30-day pass and then ship you to the Pacific. Stay here." They gave me a job at the gunnery school, and I taught the new guys about flying, gunnery, and all that kind of stuff. So in the long run, I was pretty fortunate. I'm still around.
Thank you, Mr. Perrone. It is my pleasure to introduce our last speaker, Mr. Joseph A. Sanders, my dad. After 20 years of service in the Marine Corps, Chief Warrant Officer 4, Sanders returned in 2007. During his career, he served as combat videographer, capturing the history of Marine Corps in many countries, including Honduras, Panama, and Iraq. As an officer, he led combat photographers and videographers who also recorded the Marine Corps history. He currently serves as Deputy Chief Management Officer for the Defense Media Activity at Department of the Defense at Fort Meade. After work, he comes back home to be my awesome dad. Please welcome Mr. Joseph A. Sanders.
Thank you, Carly, for that very nice introduction. You gave me a little bit of a tear thinking back and seeing how big she's getting every day. I want to thank Principal Mirenzi and Miss Rudow for inviting me here today. I really appreciate it. I want to thank Mr. Abbott for the women's choir and the ladies for singing this morning. It was a beautiful performance. All the distinguished guests, other military people in the audience, and our two gentlemen here from World War II. That's quite amazing for me to hear. And I want to thank the 8th graders for being so attentive and listening to their stories, because I think it's very critical for you to absorb that and share that with your friends. So please take away something they said and share that with a friend this weekend. I know this is a short school day. Carly and I talked about that, so I want to follow that theme and keep my remarks very short. But I want to say a couple words about veterans I hope you take to heart. A very short bit about me, as Carly said. I joined the Marine Corps in 1986. I was in college and realized that it was too hard to work full-time, go to college full-time, so I decided to join the service and went down to the recruiter's office, and at that time it's a consolidated recruiting office, and there's Air Force recruiters, Army, Navy, and Marines. So I go down there and with the intent to see the Air Force recruiter, because at the time I said I didn't want to be a Marine because I didn't really want to be a pincushion for bullets. That's sort of what we called it, and lo and behold, the only recruiter that was there was the Marine recruiter. And I learned that about the other services as I got in, about the difference between the time you get up in the morning and the time you go to work with the Marines and the other services, and we had that little service rivalry. But he talked me into becoming an air traffic controller. And so I joined the Marine Corps in 1986 while I was going to Indiana University back in Indiana, and I became an air traffic controller. I went to boot camp in San Diego, went to Millington, Tennessee for school, graduated school at the top of my class, went to Beaufort, South Carolina, was talking to aircraft for about a year, and I realized I did not like this job. I did not like sitting in a tower all day talking to aircraft. It just was not my thing. I wanted to be out and about and actually become a Marine. That's what I thought in my mind. So I was lucky enough that at my high school, back then, we had a television studio where we actually did daily broadcasting of events. We did sport events, we did news events, and so I found that the Marine Corps had these people that were called combat cinematographers or videographers and combat photographers. And I said, hey, that looks like the job for me, so I followed the system and actually did what we call a lateral move and became a combat videographer. And then that's when I really fell in love with the Marine Corps, because I got to see the entire Marine Corps in that job, because as a combat videographer, my job was to document the history of the Marine Corps and to work with intelligence people to do reconnaissance stuff. So I did that. So that was about 1988, and from there I took off and I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to 2nd Marine Division Combat Camera, and I deployed to Panama in '89 when we were doing some Noriega stuff, and I went to Honduras in '90, and then I went to Iraq in '91, and I was fortunate enough to be in Iraq. I actually inserted in northern Iraq, spent about 6 months there when we pulled all the Kurdish refugees out of the mountains, and we saved hundreds of thousands of Kurds that time, and that's when we sort of started what we're ultimately in it now with Operation Iraqi Freedom. We set up the no-fly zone at that time, which held all the way through Operation Iraqi Freedom. So I was there at the very beginning of that. So it was very interesting to move on. Then I was blessed enough to be commissioned an officer and attained the rank of CWO4 and retired right here at Fort Meade, where I met my wife Heather and I have my beautiful daughters, one who's a senior and applying to college, which is scarier than being in the Marine Corps. It's pretty scary. But that's just a little bit about me, but I want to keep it short. But what I really want to talk about today, because I think it's good for the children, is what do veterans look like? Most of the time as children, you think of people wearing military uniforms, such as our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, which is very true. But, and some of those people are here today in the audience, which I think is wonderful. But a veteran is someone who served honorably, who has left the military, retired from the military, and people who served in war or armed conflicts. Those are technical definitions from the VA. But today we have a custom in America today, during Veterans Day, to honor the people who are currently serving. And we recognize them as veterans because we are and have been in a time of war for a very long time. So I think that is just amazing that we do that, because it didn't used to be that way back when I was young. So I really appreciate that custom today. But back to what veterans look like who aren't in uniform. As we know, these gentlemen right here are some veterans. They got some uniform items on, which I think is really cool. I don't wear mine. Maybe when I get fully retired, I will do that. But I think that's really awesome. I love his bomber jacket. That's really cool. But I'm a veteran, and I wear a suit today. I served for 20 years and 3 days. And if you've ever served anyone other who's going to retire, you get it down to the day when you retire because it's just the way it is. So it was 20 years and 3 days I've served. So I counted those up. I retired as a commissioned officer, as my daughter said. And I'm very proud of my service. I served in many places around the world. Some were nice, some were a little scary. But I love being a Marine. And if you notice, kids, I said love, which is present tense, because in the Marine Corps we have a saying that once a Marine, always a Marine, even when you're retired. So it's very true. You can ask my wife and kids. I still act that way on some days, even though it's been 10 years since I've been retired. Anyway, I'm humbled today by the amazing Marines that I served beside and had the honor of leading. They're incredible. I also had the pleasure of serving with many people from the other military services. I did a couple of DOD and joint tours, so that was a lot of fun. And today I serve at Fort Meade as a Deputy Chief Management Officer for a defense agency, and I'm sort of like the G3 in the military terms, or the Chief Operating Officer in civilian terms. That's what I do, and I really enjoy my job. It's great. I get to serve with a ton of military people every day, and that is exciting. But I wanted to stress these points because sometimes you forget who the veterans are because you don't see them in uniform every day. So the reason I want to talk about that is based on the 2016 Veterans Administration survey, there are 20.4 million people who are veterans in America today. 20.4 million people who are no longer wearing the uniform. That's a lot of people in our country that are out there. And I stress this point because I bet many of you sitting out there have family members, friends, and neighbors who are veterans and you don't even know it. They look just like everyone else, which is a really cool part about being an American. Our veterans serve to protect you and your rights, and ultimately their own rights to be free, just regular people. And I think that's pretty awesome. So back to that theme. What do veterans look like who aren't in uniform? To answer this question, I offer you a challenge, 8th graders. Between now and Monday, which is Veterans Day, seek out veterans from your family, friends, and neighbors. You may need to ask your parents for help, which is okay. Try to discover someone who's a veteran that you didn't even know. You can learn about a family member. Your grandpa could be a veteran, you never knew it, because you never asked. Your neighbor lady who always buys the Girl Scout cookies could be a veteran, you don't even know it. Anyone can be a veteran, you just don't know it. So please ask. So I ask that you take up this challenge as a way to honor veterans. And if you discover a veteran and get the opportunity, tell him or her, thank you for your service. These five words actually mean a great deal. It makes them feel really good. I know this because last weekend I was at Home Depot because I like woodworking and I spend too much time there, but I was there again. And I was buying my stuff and I pull out my retired military ID card, and because you get a discount as a military or retired military person. And the young person at the counter said those 5 words to me. And it felt really nice to be appreciated by that young man who was standing there at the counter checking out whatever I bought that I didn't tell my wife that I bought that day for another project. But I know if you say those words to a veteran, he or she will feel really good and appreciate it. So please take up the challenge and tell your social studies teacher next week if you found a veteran. I apologize to the 8th grade social studies teachers and specifically Miss O'Connor, Carley's teacher, for putting you in to this challenge, but I think it's worth it for the veterans, so if they come to you, that would be nice. So please, I challenge you to find a veteran, tell them those 5 words, and help them feel appreciated. So please go out there and discover a veteran. So I promise I'd make it short, and so there it is. I want to give you a little bit about me and put a challenge out there. So thank you for allowing me to speak today. Semper Fidelis to my fellow Marines. Happy Veterans Day to my fellow veterans and 8th grade teachers.
Thank you very much to all 3 of you. I felt very honored to be able to take the silk escape flag around for you to see. It actually gave me chills as I was walking around with it. Thank you so much for that. Truly appreciate it. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today, and to all of our veterans for the various roles that you play for this great nation of ours. Everyone here today is indebted to our veterans, past and present, for the incredible country that we live in, the freedoms we have, and all the opportunities that we enjoy as Americans. Eighth grade students, as you continue your National History Day research about triumph and tragedy, I would encourage you to think about the lessons learned from the past successes and failures that we as a nation have experienced. This project allows you to explore topics from space to the depths of the oceans and the people, past and present, that took place in those triumphs and the tragedies, in some cases, that unfolded. Research a topic that interests you. Dig deep to understand it thoroughly. Make the most of your National History Day project. We have several primary resources with us today that would probably be open to interviews. Talk to your 8th grade social studies teacher, please. And I have contact information available for our guests. I would also like to remind the 8th grade students that on Monday evening, November 12th at 6:30, there is help available to all of you at Crofton Library, starting at 6:30 in the evening. You can go there, and the librarians and the staff are prepared to help you get into your research and dig deeper into your topics of choice. I hope to see you there Monday nights. Recently, though, I was asked about poppies and why some people wear a red flower. This Veterans Day marks the 100-year anniversary of the end of World War I on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The practice of wearing a poppy actually began after the publication of the poem In Flanders Field, but it was to raise money. You bought a poppy, and those funds went to veterans. That's how it all began. Today, we wear the poppy to remember. The red poppy petals actually stand for the blood spilled by soldiers fighting in the war. The black of the poppy symbolizes those who never returned home. And the green leaf on the poppy leaf, which should be worn above your heart, and it should be at the 11th hour, which is where the green leaf of the poppy is located. It should be at the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month. That poem was written by a grieving doctor. He sat looking over a field of hastily dug graves. They had to do that at night. And as he looked out over that the very next morning, within a couple of minutes, Flanders Field was written based on what he saw in front of him. And there truly were red poppy flowers growing on the graves of those soldiers. For the past 17 years, Crofton Middle has gathered on Veterans Day to honor those who have served and currently serve our great nation. Through all of the triumphs and the tragedies. And while we honor the living today, we would be remiss not to remember the fallen. So our ceremony today is going to conclude with William Franklin playing taps and a moment of silence to follow.